Hey everybody, welcome to Technically Unraveled. I am Kristen, your Senior Director of Microsoft Go-to-Market here at Pax8. So before we get started, it is the middle of Cybersecurity Month. There's a ton of stuff going on between Academy Live, we've got Technically Unraveled right here, and then you've got the game on Fridays. So make sure you like, share, subscribe, because you don't want to miss out on what is going on all of these live shows. So as always, I want to hop right into the updates first and foremost, because there's a lot going on this week. If you are a partner that has not taken the Cloud Ascent course here at Pax8 in the Academy section, highly recommend you do that. Now it's going to show you how do you go in, actually download this information from your partner center. It's going to explain what is Cloud Ascent, also known as CLAS, but it's only going to give you information on your current customer base. So you're going to download this information. We give you this super nifty Excel that you are going to go and load all this information into, tell you how much opportunity you have in your own customer base, people you already know, you love, you like, all of that good stuff. Easy way for you to go talk to them. So please make sure you check out that course. A lot of really good information. If you have questions about it, reach out to your account team. All right, there's a partner enablement session that our person that's going to be on here in just a moment is going to be part of. So please make sure if you're in North America, you can go and still register. There's a couple of spots left, so make sure you do it quickly. It's going to be the 26th of October. There's a link down below, so please make sure, go register, reserve that spot, because as soon as it fills, they're going to put a wait list. So you're not going to be guaranteed. So please make sure. There's going to be a lot of SMB talk about business premium, all kinds of good stuff there. Got questions on Copilot? I hear you all, okay? We all got a lot of questions happening. So we found this website and it really just breaks down some really neat tools. They've got some quick videos. It goes through each part of the productivity suite and how does Copilot actually integrate. So there's blogs. If you're an admin, there's information for you. So we posted that link down below. I found it of great use. So please make sure you check it out. It definitely, as Copilot licenses are getting rolled out, if you've got questions, it covers a lot of it. So check that one out. Thought it was a good read. Now, NCE. Feel like there needs to be like a dun, dun, dun. So public sector timeline update. I know that this has been back and forth a little bit, but CSP public sector offers an NCE is going to be starting January 1st of 2024. You guys know that this has been pushed back, but starting July 1st, Microsoft is going to start doing those migrations over. So now we've got some dates solidified. So let's start talking to your account team. Public sector, you've got government, you've got EDU, you've got nonprofit. There's going to be more information that's going to come out, but now we at least have some dates and goals to start working towards. So there is the October announcements down below. Make sure you check those out. That's a direct from Microsoft. More information will come that is tagged in there. I know that there's going to be some unanswered questions, but if you have any that we are able to answer, please make sure that you reach out to those account teams. Or we can talk about some of these Pax8 events that are upcoming, because first and foremost, we've got the Microsoft Monthly Update. I am certain that Ashley Moretti is going to cover this on November 6th with as much detail as we possibly can. So if you're not registered for the Microsoft Monthly Updates, please do. If you're not able to attend them live, we do actually post those on demand afterwards. So you can always just go back, make sure you get what you need out of those sessions. Now, North America, you've got a Dynamics Bootcamp coming up November 14th and 15th. Make sure you get registered for that. If you're in EMEA, we have a Dynamics Bootcamp that's November 7th and 8th, as well as a Cybersecurity Masterclass November 21st. Now, if you're in the APAC region, lots and lots of stuff going on. There's in-person, there's virtual launch briefings. Pick the date, pick the time that works best for you. Ton of stuff going on there, but really looking forward to hopefully seeing some partners in person if you guys are available. But if not, make sure that you register so that way you're there virtually. There's always people on the back end able to answer some of those questions. All right, without any further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce Kat Daniels. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Excellent, excellent. So, Kat, tell us who you are. What do you do? Where do you work? Why are you here? All that great stuff.
All the basic stuff. So Kat Daniels, Global Partner Technology Strategist. So I work with Microsoft's largest partners to help them build out security practices based on our Microsoft technology. I've been at Microsoft for about 6 years. I worked at Dell for like a lifetime before that, doing a lot of work for like the channel, some work for the federal government, federal integrators. So October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and so it's kind of awesome that you have me on the show this month to talk about cybersecurity because it's one of my favorite topics.
You have been such an incredible resource to us at Pax8. So, I know you've done trainings with us. You're a part of the partner enablement session that I talked about in the top of the show here. So, big thank you for all the stuff that you do and obviously taking the time today. But I've got to have a fun fact. It can be fun, it could be weird, it could be something, but I want something.
Okay. All right, so how about this? I am a giant Wheel of Time fan. Not like, oh, I watch the videos on like Prime giant fan. Try like, I've been reading the books since I was in middle school and I was part of an online AOL role playing group for Wheel of Time.
Oh,
Yes.
you
Oh, I totally was. Like for
were. Okay.
years.
I love for years. Okay. So you read the books, not just like watched a little like like you were in there.
Oh, totally in there. So, like the past 2 years, I have pretty much been living my best life because, like, now it's on the big screen, and Rosamund Pike is amazing. Like, she was like awesome cast. Everyone has been an amazing cast. But yeah, that's Kat's fun fact is that I was into Wheel of Time before it was cool. I don't know if that necessarily makes me cool, but yeah, like a huge fan.
Man, throw away all those jean skirts. Everything comes back in time. I don't know. Maybe it's just the kind of things. We'll just keep going with it.
The
So,
flannel is coming back, which is super weird because I live in Austin, Texas, and it's
yeah,
it's like 86 degrees outside, and you still see people in the flannel. Like it, I mean,
yeah,
I'm all for
it's
dedication
all
to fashion,
seasons.
but at some point it just doesn't make any sense.
It's fine. We're all sweating in our flannels. It's 85 degrees. We're fine in Texas,
Totally.
guys. Okay. So maybe we'll shift over to cybersecurity. We'll shift back to fall at some point, I'm certain. But it's cybersecurity month. And I mean, you've seen them. I've seen them. The hoodies, the scary, the dark, the face, where, your typical hacker, whatever it looks like. So these are your typical threat actors that you see, right? But is that what we're actually looking at here? Is these are the people like are we going from basement to basement looking for people in hoodies on their computers late at night?
No, so that's been one of the really fascinating things about how like the cybercrime industry has developed is it definitely went from like this cloak and dagger, like someone hiding in their basement, like doing bad things, to almost in some respects mirroring what like MSPs look like. So, you're going from guy in a hoodie in a basement to like guy in khakis and a polo. And the way that they go to market and the way that they're monetizing their services has changed too. So if you've been around the Microsoft ecosystem for a significant amount of time, you'll probably remember this slide about like the IP staircase. And the idea is that most MSPs will start out doing hardware resale. Like a lot of times they'll start out selling printers and laptops. And the margins on that are like 5 to 10 points. Then they'll get into, well, customer will ask them to actually set up the printer or the laptop. And so they get into doing like professional services, and the margins on that are slightly better. Then they get into this managed service model where like they have a contract and every month they come out and they service the printer or the laptops. And then eventually they get so good at it that they start developing their own intellectual property to manage the laptops and manage the printers, right? And they sell that to other MSPs. Like if you look at Nerdio is a great example of that, right? They started out as an MSP. Now they're selling their tools for Azure Virtual Desktop, which are like top notch. But that's kind of what their journey ended up looking like. And these threat actors are doing the exact same thing. So they go from like scraping credentials and like harvesting credentials from people to like, oh, I'm going to go do bad stuff to like I'm going to rent out my services to other people to help them do bad stuff because that lowers their risk profile, right? You go from being the person who's doing the bad stuff to the person who's like selling and marketing a tool that helps other people do the bad stuff. So you're one step removed from whatever, law enforcement action is going to be taken. And some of these guys are pretty slick. Like they have merchandising stores. Like, hey, you can buy this tool that's going to like capture screenshots off someone's laptop, and you can buy a hoodie. Like, so it's just interesting to see how they've evolved in response to how the market has evolved. But I think that's also like a really awesome opportunity for MSPs because, you know, the person that's, you're fighting against isn't an unknown factor. It's someone who looks a lot like you. So now you can plan, you kind of know what that person looks like, and you can take some steps, right?
It's, what's funny is you, Matt Lee, Dom, they always go after those printers. Everybody wants to talk about these printers first and foremost. So, I mean, tell me why. Like, why is it always like the printer scenario?
Oh, well, the printer scenario is because like you set it up and it starts working, and then you never want to touch the printer because you don't want it to stop working, right? Like they're kind of finicky. So typically they don't have much of a life cycle. Like you will keep using a printer until it stops working, right? Like you don't care if they're not updating the firmware anymore. You don't care if there's security patching anymore. Like you just care if that thing prints out stuff for you. So that's a big component of it. Also, it's one of those things that's like secretly networked. So it's tied into your entire infrastructure, but people usually don't take steps to secure it, right? Because they just want to get it to work. So they're not even thinking about like, hey, how do I lock this thing down? It's more like, how do I get this thing to print double-sided? So a lot of times it's like an overlooked entry point into the organization. So like nothing against printers, but it's just it's one of those things that's just overlooked. Another one that's kind of crazy to think about is like electronic door locks, right? Like I don't know what you have
Really?
at your house or at your office, but like they're networked, right? Like I can get to like some of the front doors using Wi-Fi or using Bluetooth. So, but then that gives you access to the rest of the network in the house. So it's a lot of things like that that people just don't even think about. So it's nothing personal against printers. It's just,
It's the easy
there's
way in.
yeah, exactly.
Got it. So, if I'm a partner, are there any recommendations that you can make that would hopefully make me look maybe like a little less attractive to any of these, people in khakis, no longer in hoodies?
Yeah, Jake from State Farm. Yeah,
Exactly.
the thing is like okay, so you're an MSP or an MSSP, and like what's the biggest constraint on you as a business? It's time and it's money, right? Those are the things you don't have a whole heck of a lot of. So what you need to do for your customers and for yourself is just make getting into the environment that much harder, make it more difficult. So someone who's going after you goes, this is not worth it. Like the ROI associated with this action is not going to give me what I'm looking for. So basically, you just don't want to be low hanging fruit, right? And the way to do that is like pretty simple. It's like basic security defaults. Every vendor publishes them. Microsoft publishes them. You know, anyone that you have in your environment or your customers have in their environment, like look up what the security recommendations are for the product. If they don't have security recommendations, like that's probably a giant red flag. But if they do have security recommendations, like follow them, like change default passwords, right? Also doing something like MFA with conditional access. So not just MFA where you get prompted for like, hey, I'm going to text you a code, but also add some intelligence into that. Like, hey, there's a request asking to, get into this account from like a suspicious region or a suspicious time of night. Like, I have conditional access on my Xbox login. So I got notified by Microsoft that someone was trying to log into my Xbox Live account from the Ukraine at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like I have two kids under 5. I am not up at 3 in the morning playing Xbox. Like I'm in bed at 8 o'clock. So it was super unusual behavior. Also, it was super unusual that I would be logging in from that region of the world because I've never traveled there. So conditional
Hmm.
access caught that and was like, hey, I don't think this is you. I'm going to prompt for credentials. Like, and obviously I denied that. I was like, no, that's not me.
Like,
So
please don't
just
be me. Like, no, no, no.
no, no, no. Unless you're gonna like beat this level for me, in which case, yes, we're totally fine. Um, so it was kind of one of those, it's kind of one of those things like you can get around those things, right? If there's a will, there's a way, but it's much harder, right? And if I'm a threat actor, I'm gonna look at that and go, do I want to put the time and effort into getting around like the MFA that's on this user? No, I'm gonna move on to the next person, right? And that's like kind of how you have to think about it, is that you just need to make it really difficult for them. You can't make it impossible for them, because impossible is like you take your laptop and you encase it in cement and like drop it at the bottom of the ocean, right? There's a trade-off between security and productivity, but you can at least make it really difficult for these guys.
That makes sense. And I mean, I think part of it for the partners is also taking that end customer along the knowledge journey, because I think there's a little bit of, where they have to say, hey, you know what, are you aware that this is common? Or, do you see a lot of the partners really talking to the end customers about specific threats and just encouraging them that way?
Yeah, I think the really successful ones do. Like they have the kind of relationship with their end customers where you know, there's a shared responsibility model there, right? Like there's the responsibility of the end customer to understand what the partner is doing for them and how they're protecting their business. But there's also a responsibility on the MSP or MSSP to really understand that customer's business and what their business processes is and like where things can get hung up, right? Because it's not just technology that solves security problems, it's also like end user education and improving business processes. Like, something as simple as maybe someone's not allowed to wire more than $5,000 without getting two people signing off on it, right? Like just some basic business controls. But if you, as an MSSP or an MSP, really understand your customer's business, then you can say, like, hey, before accounting signs off on this invoice, like we need to put some controls in place. And if you understand them at that level, like you can really give them some solid advice.
So, and I mean, as they start to really solidify their security, right? I mean, sometimes it's the end users that are like the ones that start pushing back. Like, what do you mean? I've got to download Authenticator? Like, that's absolutely atrocious. I'm never doing that. So, I mean, does it always have to be a painful process for the end customers? Or, I mean, how does that work before? I mean, you don't want to over engineer, but you don't want people to get in. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's always trade-offs, right? And the whole thing about security is all about mitigating risk or minimizing risk as much as possible. And if you're accepting some level of risk in your business, like I think as an MSP, you need to understand that, and the customer needs to understand that. Like, hey, if you don't want to turn these things on, here's the potential things that can happen. And I know you think that, only big companies, have security incidents. Like those are the ones that hit the news because those companies have requirements that where they have to disclose that information, right? Like the reason we know about the attack on Caesars is because they were legally required to disclose that to us. But most cybersecurity incidents happen with smaller customers because they are that low hanging fruit, right? They're less likely to spend money on IT. They're less likely to have those security controls in place. So those are the easiest ones to go after. So I think it's a bit naive to think I'm never going to be impacted, right? I mean, if the last 2 to 3 years have taught us anything about how things spread, like there's pretty much no avoiding it, right? I mean, it's a terrible example, but like
But
that,
it connects you're not
yeah,
wrong here.
yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where everyone is going to be exposed to some level of cybersecurity risk at
Mhm.
some point, and it's just a question of like how can you manage that? And I think the first part about managing that risk is really understanding what that risk is.
Got it. So you're an MSP, you're wanting to educate your end customer, and they just say, absolutely not. I'm not doing it. I like the way that my things work now. I don't want any sort of MFA. I don't want this. I mean, that's going to increase your partner liability. So, what are your thoughts on? I mean, do you see a lot of breakups, or do you just accept that risk? Like, what happens there?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, right? Because it's an emotional decision and it's a business decision. I mean that customer who is so unwilling to change might have been like the first customer you signed up as a company, and so you feel like you have some loyalty there. But, at the end of the day, you're doing them a disservice if you're not setting those things up for them and protecting them. And if they're really not interested in going down that path, I mean, that could be a very real and significant risk to your own business, right? Because everything is connected nowadays. That's the cool part about like the Microsoft Intelligent Security Graph is that we used to look at security as just like lists of stuff that we protected, where the security graph is really showing like here's how everything is interconnected and here's the connection points between things. And same thing as your MSP is like, okay, so I'm managing this customer, which means I have some sort of RMM tool that's probably in their environment that's helping manage things. Like, what happens if that customer gets compromised and then that tool gets compromised and all of a sudden they work all their way all the way back to my company? How does that impact my other customers, right? And it may even be a case of like you might be losing future business because you have this very, very risky customer that you're supporting. So I think it's sitting down and having a hard conversation with them and having a plan B for them. Like, hey, we might not be the right partner for you anymore, but here's this up and coming company that would be happy to work with you, right? And you see that a lot of times in the industry where as MSPs grow to a certain size, some customers don't make sense for them to support anymore. And so, hey, let me make sure you're being taken care of, right? And then, everyone sort of wins. And maybe if that customer hears it from the next MSP and maybe the next MSP after that, maybe they'll kind of get an idea that like, hey, this is a thing that people aren't willing to compromise on.
And I mean, I think there's so many factors that go into it. I think sometimes maybe the end customer might say they're just going for a cash grab. This is what everybody's talking about. I'm not the MGM. Nobody cares. And so why would they come after me? This person's just looking for their next, check in their box. And I think the education piece is so important in that, because if you're having that consistently with the end customer, you're going to start to have that relationship where they're going to start to really look at you and say, hey, you know what? You've been taking me along this journey along the way. This isn't the first time that I heard that cybersecurity is important, but I do need to make these steps. So I think it's definitely a partnership, but I can see where it would be really tough, especially if it was one of your like favorite customers, your first one, your big win, whatever it was. So man, that's tough. But I mean, Kat, you work at Microsoft. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if are you saying, would you say is a better way? Would you say
Ooh.
that, ooh, I know, I'm trying to really set it up here. Now, would you say that it should be all Microsoft on the line card? Is that easier for partners? I mean, do they need to look at the multi-vendor approach? I mean, what are your thoughts here? Because I think that, people have different stances on this. We have all Microsoft shops, or we have people who say, hey, you know what, we need to diversify.
Yeah, so I'm going to say one of those really irritating things that consultants say, which is I'm going to say it depends. And it really does, right? Like that decision is so individual to your business. It's so individual to the skill set that you have and the vision that you have for your company. Like there's something to be said for defense in depth, which is having like sort of multiple moats and like walls and things between you and a threat actor. There's also something to be said for like simplifying on a single stack so that your people know how to use it and they're like really, really good at using that thing. I mean, think about it like exercise, right? Like people get so like over indexed on like, I'm going to have this perfect workout. I'm going to work all these muscle groups, but like consistently working out like 20, 30 minutes a day, whether that's taking a walk or like lifting some weights, probably has the same health benefits. Like, so it's really like, what are you trying to get out of it, right? So as a company, if I'm trying to make things simpler for my staff, and I primarily am standardized on Microsoft, and my customers are standardized on Microsoft, like, hey, that might be the best route to go. And then maybe there's a couple of like ISVs So Microsoft has the Microsoft Intelligent Security Association, which is like ISVs that integrate with Microsoft technology. Like maybe I use a couple of those to fill in some gaps for things that maybe Microsoft doesn't do great today. Or maybe I find that I have customers that have a variety of stuff in their environment. And so I might choose to support Microsoft and like a couple other vendors, right? That's totally a decision for you as a business. And you have to have this sort of like, I'd almost say like self-assessment of where your skill set is and how you can best serve customers. I mean, so many times in like cybersecurity, we say like start with an assessment, know your customers, know what technology and assets they have, know where the gaps are. You kind of have to turn that lens inward and think about you as a partner. Like, where are my gaps? Where do I have assets? Like, how can I best serve my customers with the things that I have? And that might even mean having P2P relationships with other partners that complement your capabilities, right? Like, maybe you're not staffed for a 24/7 SOC, but you have customers who want that capability. Like, hey, go find someone who can do that for you and work together. Because I think that's the biggest thing with security is like it's a team sport. It's all about working together. And so really you just need to find that strategy that's going to work best for you.
And I mean, even if you just raise the tide a little bit each day, you know what I mean? I think it's those baby steps that all of a sudden, as a whole, everybody starts to say, hey, you know what, this is what's important. So, you know, I find it interesting that you say the P2P motion because we talk a lot about that here at Pax8. We have our professional services team that says, hey, you know what, either we could teach you to do it, we can do it for you. But then we also have a group of really well trusted partners. And I mean, do you see the P2P motion working well? I mean, I think sometimes partners might say, hey, why would I let somebody into my business? Like, isn't that a little scary? Like, you know, dark room basement kind of vibes. But do you see that working well?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think it works really, really well when both partners know exactly who they are and they know what their swim lanes are and they know what they're good at and they know what they're not good at, right? Where it doesn't work well is it's like, hey, I do this thing really, really well and I do this other thing kind of okay. And I'm going to keep trying to do this thing I don't do kind of okay. Like, then you just get a lot of confusion and gray areas and people fighting about who's responsible for what, right? But when you have these P2P relationships where it's like, hey, I'm going to do the pre-sales activity, I'm going to do the professional services, but like I'm not staffed for managed services. I'm not staffed for an SLA. I'm not staffed for around the sun coverage. Let's bring in a partner who can do that and only that, right? And then we have this sort of mutual agreement that any customers that I bring to you, you're not going to sell them, the professional services and the licensing, and vice versa. And I think that works really well. And there's a couple of partnerships specifically in security where that's worked out extremely well.
Nice. And I mean, so you talk to a ton of partners. And do
Mhm.
you have any, what are you seeing that's just like truly innovative right now in the partner landscape? Because times are changing, right? I mean, there's AI and all these different things. Like, is there anything that you're seeing that you're like, wow, that's really cool?
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing that's really, really cool and really interesting is like this shift to more preventative security versus like reactive security. Because so many times you think about like when partners are providing security services, it's like, oh crap, I can't get into my files. Like I better call someone, right? It's more on like the incident response, like come in post breach and clean up things. It's been really interesting to see this pivot towards partners providing proactive services. Like, hey, let's go in, let's take a look at your environment, let's make some recommendations about how you could do this better. So we minimize that risk of you having an incident ahead of time, right? Like, I really like that shift in thinking. And I also like the co-pilots are all super, super cool. And where I see partners having a lot of added value is getting customers ready for that stuff. Because you need to think about, like, okay, I have the AI, it's pretty awesome, but like, how do I secure that AI, right? Like, how do I prevent someone at my company from asking the AI a question that like maybe they shouldn't know the answer to? Like, hey, who are we going to let
Uploading
go
my
next week?
financials.
Right. How much did we pay the CEO, last quarter? How much does my coworker make? Like, having the right sort of data protection policies in place, but also think about it from the perspective of like if someone gets into your environment, they could ask that Copilot or that LLM some really uncomfortable questions, right? And it might surface some information that that person shouldn't have access to. So I think like that's the next frontier is really figuring out data security and data classification. And it's been interesting because that's always been something that people in regulated industries really had to worry about. Like SMBs, maybe not as much, unless they did a lot of work with the federal government. But now you're seeing some of those technologies extend down the stack. And so I think that's going to be really interesting for partners to build that muscle because, like today, that's a very specialized skill set. People who do data classification and like data loss prevention. But I see in the future that everyone's going to need that skill set.
With times are changing, and it's funny. I mean, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, just going through different blogs, different people who post a lot of stuff. And Rod Trent works with you at Microsoft,
Yeah,
correct? I think that you follow him as well.
totally.
So he posts a lot of stuff, but I mean, what area does he really specialize in? Because I mean, making a shameless plug here because I get a ton of content from him to be able to say, like, he's got a ton of stuff going on. And I'm like, man, these are great resources.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just really fantastic sort of envisioning like these are ways that threat actors could theoretically take advantage of some of these newer technologies and here's some ways that you can like sort of proactively think about protecting against them, right? Like think about it from the perspective of like that might not be a problem or a thing today, but that might be like a thing or a problem 5 to 10 years down the road. And like, how do we get in front of that? So yeah, like Rod Trent, who's on the Cloud AI, I think the security advocacy team, he posts some just absolutely amazing content. I think if you look at Ignite, which is about a month away, there's going to be some really amazing announcements around some of the things that Microsoft is thinking about in terms of like AI and how do we protect our customers. So if you haven't registered for Ignite, I would definitely recommend that because there's going to be some really awesome sessions. But yeah, I mean there's some really interesting people on LinkedIn these days who are sharing some amazing content. And I think, always being in this mindset of like going and learning something new or something different. I know things are like changing overnight, but I think there's still a place to like go out and learn something new every day.
I couldn't agree more. Now, Kat, it's the hardest question of the whole show. I know. We talked about flannels, and I just have to know what is your pulse on pumpkin spice lattes, Kat?
What is my okay? So I personally am not a huge fan, but I think I mentioned earlier. I mentioned earlier in the show that I have small kids, and like small kids are like lab experiments. Like you never know how they're gonna react to things, right? Like you can give them something that you think is like totally great, and they're like, "Ew, mommy!" Like or in my case, I gave my kids like a pumpkin spice bread loaf that I made, and they're like, "Mommy, this is so good." So now my entire house is pumpkin spice. Like everything is pumpkin
So
spice. I am
you're committed.
afraid to tell them. I'm afraid to tell them what's going to happen in November, December when the pumpkin spice goes away, because I
Just
feel like
stock up now. Stock up now.
right. Like I really should because I think there's gonna be a riot. But then like kids, right? Like tomorrow they could be like, I hate pumpkin spice. This is gross.
Hmm.
So whatever plan I make for the future, they're probably going to upend it. Is usually how that works.
Oh, Kat, this was great. The show went by really quick, but I just want to say thank you so much. I mean, I know you're doing partner enablement sessions with us. You hang out with the Pax8 team. You see our partners often. So big, big thank you. And I know we'll be seeing you soon.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, and hopefully I'll catch you next week.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Technically Unraveled. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you all soon.